So I'm Peter Schmitz, author, speaker, and entrepreneur. I'm also a triathlete, and I want to thank you very much for buying my book, for reading my book, and for coming today. I know I hear a lot about you ladies. I've only known a few of you over the years, like from when I was a kid, but my mom tells me all good things, and I'm, she wouldn't ever embellish the truth, right? So. I promise I will sign every book before it's over, because I didn't get to sign everybody's, and I will make sure that's done. And I would also like to ask a couple of you to do a video testimonial of what you liked in the book for my website. It can be 15 seconds, 30 seconds, we can record it. You don't have to do it, but if you're comfortable speaking, that would be a big help, because I'm trying to promote this, obviously, and it's not, in today's world, that's what it takes. So, I've asked several of you what you liked best about the book. And it's interesting the feedback I get. The number one was chapter 1 of what my mother said. What a surprise. What a surprise. I was going to start this by saying you all knew me when I had 2 hands, but I don't think you all knew me when I was a kid. Some of you did. I mean, you did. And Mary Ann Shade did. Not Shade, I'm sorry, but Morris. But so it goes way back. So that's how far back I go with Mary Ann. But yeah, it's quite a story. So I think, has everybody read it? So I know, where I'm starting from. I think everybody's read it, and no, you don't have one yet. So we won't hold that against you. Somebody said my mother's been in this book club for 25 years, and she couldn't believe it. I said, well, she's a slow reader. So I teased my mom in case you didn't know. But the book starts out the day I lost my arm, and you guys, it was at Austin's, and it was a pretty tragic day. But the story goes. This is the part you don't know. I don't think this was in the book. When I wrote that chapter, I told my story, what had happened. And my story was, the accident occurred, I went to the hospital in the ambulance, I remembered all that. I remember coming out of the store where the crowd was there, the young girl I was chasing was there. I remember all that, even though I was supposedly in shock, I still can picture it in my head. And I remember the manager I worked with, and he shut the machine off, and all that stuff I remember. It's not the point of the message today, but when I wrote the story, I woke up in the hospital. They put a needle in my arm, and before they took it out, I was out. And they couldn't find my parents, right? Because nobody had cell phones. My aunt, I think it was my Aunt Pat or my Uncle Paul that came. I heard somebody's voice. They put a needle in, and I was out. And they cut my brand new shirt off me, which really made me mad, because it was a brand new white shirt. So I remember a lot of the details, which is kind of weird, because people say that's not exactly normal. But so I wrote this chapter, and I woke up in the hospital. My dad was sleeping in a chair next to me, snoring, right? That was in the book. So I sent that to my mom, because writing a book is an arduous process. And I said, what do you think? And she said, that's not what happened. And I said, what do you mean that's not what happened? That's what I remember, right? And she says, no, you missed this part. And it's the part that she wrote in the chapter 1, right? She added that to the story. Now, this is 46 years later, and I did not know that story till I sent her the chapter. Now, think about that for a minute. You all know what she said to me, right? I used that story to entice people to buy the book because they want to know what my mother said to me. You guys all know that, okay? But she said, 2 of my friends were there, and I said, there's a guy who was selling newspapers. Maybe I'm in the newspaper, get a newspaper. She hands me the newspaper, and I can't open it. And she says, you'll just have to figure it out, right? Some of you quoted her from the book, and she left the room in tears. Now, I don't remember any of that. I still don't. I remember everything else but that. And pretty powerful story, because as I look back when I wrote this book, I have lived my entire life by those words. You just have to figure it out. Call it resourcefulness, call it creativity, call it what you want. I've had to figure a lot of things out as you read the story. A lot of those things I had to figure out. They didn't have artificial arms were around, but a lot of things I do, they didn't have. The swimming arm I have was the first one ever created that they knew about. But that moment was a very defining moment in my life. I teach my son to be resourceful, and he credits me with that today. And I got it from that moment. So choose your words carefully. You all have influence. And the point of the book, and we'll cover this towards the end, is be the one. Be the one that does that kind of inspiration. And what's amazing about that is you never know how it's going to turn out. Because that's one very powerful story that came out of the book, and it's affected me my entire life, and I gave credit to my mom. And I had a writer help me, went back and forth about how to put this in the book. Right? Do we make it first person? I'm telling you guys stuff because you're a book club, and you know my mom. Do we put it in first person or third person and all that? And so the writer helped me figure this out, and it came out really well because it's in her words, and you can tell it's her speaking to me. But pretty powerful. And then you all know the rest. 2 days later, my swim team coach shows up, right? Clyde Trutman. How many of you know Clyde? Some of you guys know Clyde Trutman from the... So I was on the swim team, I don't know, since I was 9 or 10, something like that. And I was, at the time, I was competing with Tracy, but I was the best male breaststroker on the team. I was always the guy that was on the relay teams. That was my sophomore year in high school. I lost my arm between my sophomore and junior year, right about now. What day is today?
July 17th, I think it was.
No, I think it's July 18th, but that's not the point. I think it's I really don't know. I'd have to look up the date, but it's in July of 1968. But the point is, Clyde comes in to see me. And if you know Clyde, he's not a man of many words. Clyde Trutman, right? Yeah. So, from the YMCA. He was my swim team coach, and I worked for him as well. But he comes in, I'm laying in bed, my arm is all bandaged up. This is 2 or 3 days later, and I remember looking up at him, and I said, I guess I won't be swimming anymore. And all he said is, yes, you will. I'll see you in the fall. And you didn't argue with Clyde, right? As a 16-year-old kid, you didn't argue with Clyde. He was the coach, and he knew. So I go back to swimming with 1.5 arms. And you don't go very fast. You kind of go in circles. And so Clyde was a man of integrity. And I was on the best, and I couldn't keep up. So he bumped me to the junior varsity, and I couldn't keep up. He bumped me to the sub, and all the way down to the junior varsity. Now these are little kids. And as I reflect, and I still couldn't keep up until I got my paddle. This was one of my first arms. This is from 1969, 68 or 69, and it's just been retired last year. I got a new one, but I'll cover that in a few minutes. But this served me well from a competitive swimming standpoint. So it's never been, as far as I know back then, it had never been made. And I could tell you a lot of stories about this because it served me well. But I had to work my way back to being back on the varsity, and I competed in my senior year of high school at the National YMCA swim meet, swimming a 100-yard breaststroke. And so I was almost as fast as I was with 2 hands. But it was funny because you have to touch with 2 hands for breaststroke to be legal. In the national meet, I got disqualified because he didn't see this. So Clyde had to go tell him I only had 1 hand. And they let me go. But what's really funny now is when I compete in para-triathlons, there's no devices allowed in the water. So I swim with 1.5 arms. And I'm almost as fast as I was back then with 2 arms. Yeah, I'm a very good swimmer. But I have a swimming arm, but I'm not allowed to use it. I can use it in the Ironman events because their rules are different, but in the para-triathlon events, I'm not allowed to. But that moment with Clyde, I've thought a lot about this. Is number one, is a very defining moment, like the moment with my mother. I lived my whole life. What if I didn't get back in the pool? What if I didn't get back on the horse and do it again? And when he bumped me all the way down, as I'm writing this book, I'm thinking back, why didn't I quit? Why did I keep going? I was a 17-year-old kid, and I couldn't keep up with 10-year-olds. And the only thing I can think of is that I came to the conclusion was, there's no way I was going to not win. And it's as I reflected a lot on my personal, what's inside of me. I just don't quit. And I don't know why that is, because we've talked about this. What drives one person and not another? And why do I have that drive and not someone else? Because it serves me well in triathlons as well. I just don't quit. And a really big part of that is to prove to myself that I'm still whole. To prove I can still do it. And it's not so much to prove it to everybody else as it is to prove it to me. And that was a pretty insightful process for me to write this and try to think through that, because why do I keep doing this? And it's no different in triathlons. When I get to those stories, you'll be kind of amazed as well. I didn't quit, and I worked my way back. And that whole learning process about Peter really has served me well throughout life in what I do. And so I don't know how you teach that. I wish I could tell you how to teach your grandkids to do that, because I don't know the answer. And what drove me, and I've talked to, I have several, I compete on this Dare to Try team that you've all read about, and they're all disabled athletes, and most of those guys, I've asked this question, what drives them, and it's similar thought process. They want to prove to themselves that they can still do it. And so you've read the stories about through my life how I rode a Harley, which is really stupid. You know, why would a one-armed guy ride a Harley? I mean, I learned how to ride a motorcycle, and jumped out of a perfectly good airplane. That's a really dumb thing to do. So we went twice, and I stopped. So the first time we had a great time. There was 4 of us. We trained all day, and we jumped out of the plane. It pulls the chute automatically. The sun is going down. It's absolutely gorgeous, right? So we all have a couple of cocktails, and we say, let's go do it again. So we go back the next day, and if you know anything about parachutes, you have a spare chute, and you have your regular chute. And if your regular chute fails, you have to release it. And I have my hook on, and the pilot, I'm sitting there, and the pilot's right there, and he takes us up, and he looks at me, and he goes, I'll take you up a little higher in case you have any trouble. And I went, oh, I won't say what I said, but because it's on film. But it was like, I never did it again, because I was like, people die doing that. I've done a lot of crazy things, but I don't like to die. So that was crazy stuff. And I've skied, I've scuba dived. I learned to windsurf. It's hard enough with 2 hands, but at one point I was a very good windsurfer. And but you all know that in my 60s I got into triathlons. And again, I'm not sure why. I had a friend that challenged me to it. He was a nut. He loved to do Ironmans, the really long one. That's 140 miles. And he said, let's go do this. Have you ever been to Galena? My first race was in Galena. Yeah, exactly. A lot of hills, more than Door County. And so I wasn't prepared. I had regular, walking tennis shoes. I had a mountain bike, not a triathlon type bike. I had my swimming. I had never worn a wetsuit to swim in. It's May in Galena. And we rode the course the night before, and there were 20 hills like this in the 15 miles. And I'm going, how am I going to do this? And no, you'll be fine. So I'm a pretty good swimmer. So we go in the water. We have the wetsuit. You can barely get on. It took my breath away. It was so cold. I was hyperventilating. I had to ask the guard where to stand up. And I stood up, got my composure, and I made it so this is my first race ever. This is in 2013. I'm 62 years old. Again, why, right? So then I get to the bike, and the first thing out of the transition area where everybody gets out of their wetsuits and onto their bike is a hill. I can't make it up the hill. I had to walk, and I'm like, everybody's riding and I'm walking. I'm like, why am I doing this? So anyway, I get up there, and then we go. But there was a lot of hills I couldn't ride my bike up the hill. I had to walk. And then I got to the run, right? And I go, I can't run, so I was already going to walk. The first mile is uphill. The first mile. So by now I get to the top of the hill, and there's a water station, and they're kind of picking it up. And I said, "Is this the end?" Thinking I'm at the end. And the woman says, "Well, it can be." And I said, "So it's not?" She said, "No." I said, "Well, there's no way. I didn't come this far to quit." And this is, again, my attitude. Why would I not quit when I'm waiting? There's nobody behind me. Nobody. And so I'm walking. It's 3.5 miles, whatever. The cop is following me. I think I wrote this in my book. He's following me as I'm walking. I said, "Why don't you get out and walk with me?" He's just idling behind me. So I get to the end, and there's nobody. I mean, the last 200 yards I ran, which I barely call it a run, but my 2 friends are there at the end. There's not an official, there's not a volunteer, there's not a cup on the ground. Nothing except my 2 friends. Yay, you finished. And I didn't even get a medal. I don't even have any proof I did this race, because you always get a medal for finishing, but they didn't have that. So anyway, we had a great time, and then I said, why did I do this? But I finished, and they were all excited for me. My friend Greg Journey and Doug Jones. They're still buddies today. Doug just sent me a text recently. But a couple weeks later, we went to Wakanda. So I live in Wakanda, and by now I had a pair of shoes, and I had a different bike. And so do you know anything about a road bike? A road bike is what you race on. Do you know what the shoes are that you lock your feet into the shoes? Do you know what happens when you fall over? So I bought this really nice road bike, and it's got handlebars that drop. And this is not in the. And so I get outside, and the guy gets me going, and within 10 feet I crash into the building, scrape up my arm like this because I can't work the handlebars with my hook. I got my hook on at that time. I wore my hook when I did the Galena race. Now I have a special arm. I'll show you that in a second. But so I crash. So they change all the handlebars so it's just like a road bike or a mountain bike, so I can ride it. And I go to Wakanda and do this race. And my buddy Greg says, take off the clip shoes in case you crash, because I already crashed 3 times. And when your feet are clipped in and you lose your balance, there's nothing you can do. You just fall over. There's nothing you can do to stop it. You don't even put your hand out because you're going to mess up your hand. So I had a lot of bruises on my hip. So anyway, the Wakanda Triathlon was pivotal in my triathlon life, if you will, training. In the corner in the transition at 6 o'clock in the morning, there's all these disabled people. There were 6 of them. And I went over, I'm a curious guy, I went over and I started to talk to them. And I said, who are you guys? What are you doing here? And Carrie is the executive director, and she says, we're Dare to Try. And she tells me all about the organization, and we race all this stuff. And she says, you want to race with us? And I said, absolutely, sure, because they get to go first, right? They don't have to go in the herd of all the people. Because when you go in the water with all the people, that's when you get trampled. And I did that in Galena. That was not fun. So I knew. So I went. It's at the beach, and all the para people get to go in first, and they walk in the water. So I walk in the water, and I get in, and I'm up to my waist, and there's nobody. I look around, and they're all being carried into the water because they're either paralyzed or they don't have a leg. Yeah, it blew me away. It blew me away. I was like, holy smokes. I'm not handicapped at all by comparison. So I raced with these guys, and Jose, one of my friends in the book, beat me. And he let me know that, right? Because he's, that's what we do. And so we became friends. But now I raced with him a couple more times, and then I got on the team, and now I race with him all the time. And so that's how I met Dare to Try, and that's what really kept me involved. Because if I was just racing by myself all the time, I'm not sure I would keep doing it. But when you're part of a team of like-minded people who all face the adversities that I do, and by most of them are far more disabled than I am, right? I mean, no leg. Jose's legs don't work at all. He drags them around. If you have a leg off, you can at least get an artificial leg, right? Michaela, then they pedal like this. You know what a hand cycle is? It's a 3-wheel bike. They lay in it and they pedal like this, right? They have gears in the whole thing. So they do the 15-mile ride that I do on my bike with their hands. Then they get out of that bike and they get into a 3-wheel cart and they push like this. So it's all upper body strength, and they're amazing. But even more so, try to imagine being blind and doing a triathlon. They're tied to someone in the water, their guide, so they can guide them. They ride a tandem bike, so the guide is on the front and the visually impaired Alberto is on the back. And then they run next to each other. And when I run next to them, you can hear them talking, right? Because the guide has to tell them exactly where to go so they don't trip and fall. And there's people around, and there's holes in the road, stuff like that. It's unbelievable. And if you read chapter 7, Lindsay Cook was a guide. I interviewed her. And when I interviewed, she just blew me away. Because she said she gets more out of guiding than she does racing for herself. And she'll endure more pain she guides for James than she would ever for herself. It's a completely selfless act. And so I'm feeling like a bum, right? Because I don't do that. But it's the people that we're surrounded with in this organization are just remarkable. And the lesson I learned, early on, why not quit, like on the swim team, served me well in Galena, right? Why didn't I quit? And I just did a half Ironman a week ago Saturday. And the 56-mile bike ride was not that hard. It was pretty flat. Okay, I know you, but it was not that hard. A 1.2 mile swim, 56 mile bike ride, and a 13 mile run. For me, that's the hardest part. You're a runner, you know. And my goal was to run every mile. There's a water station roughly every mile, so you can get water and then run again. And that was to run 13 miles. Because the last time I did a half Ironman, I only ran 5 or 6 miles. I couldn't run, and so I finished. That's how I got under 7 hours. And it was all that mental toughness because of what I learned earlier. And it's an endurance sport, but it's like life. Life is an endurance sport, right? You guys have been around a while, and you know, well, you know how hard it can be, right? And what does it take to keep going? I mean, these two are planning to go to an event in 2020, you know.
Oh, yeah, we are.
Yeah, to the Ryder Cup. I mean,
we're going to the Ryder Cup at Kohler. We're making it.
But where does that come from? That mental toughness. And we've been talking about it this weekend because it's what I'm speaking about. I don't have a good answer where it comes from. I think it's based on your drive that you're born with. And I'm not sure you can instill drive into somebody, but you can certainly have influence and try to spark it and encourage it. And in my book, Be the One is what that's about. Because I'm thrilled that you're inspired by my story, or at least I think you are, and the stories of the guys in the book. But the real point is the world needs more inspiration. And you guys can be that inspiration. And the best way I can tell you is share your story. And everybody has a story, and telling your story is how you connect at the heart. And I learned this in a seminar, because I didn't know how to do this. You connect at the heart by sharing who you are and what your story is. And women are obviously better at it than men, or at least I think you are. But what's your story? Because a woman who's been through divorce, who's been sexually abused, whatever the story is, somebody else can connect with that story. And that's where you can have influence, inspire someone, and be the one. And so that's pretty much what I have to say about the book. I was going to show you a bunch of my arms because people like to see what I have and how they work and all that good stuff. And my bike, I'm happy to answer any questions. I can talk for a long time about what's in the book and stories. But the real message is for you guys to be the one. And choose your grandchild. Who was I talking to? You about how to find a mentor for one of your children, because mentors are so powerful. Look what Clyde did in my life, right? He didn't know what he was doing. I asked him. There was a tribute to Clyde 3 or 4 years ago, and I spoke at it and I told that story because nobody knew that story, right? Because it was my story and Clyde's story. And I went up to him afterwards and I said, he remembered it perfectly, just like I did. I said, did you know what you were saying to me? He said, no. I only know you needed something. That's all he said. What was that, 6 words he told me when in the hospital? What an impact. That's the impact, people. You have that ability. You never know when the moment's going to happen, right? You got to be prepared. Clyde didn't know what the moment was. He didn't know what he said, how much impact it would have. But I bet I've known enough people now that have had Clyde stories, right? And they've all been impacted by Clyde. And that's what I want to be, something like that. Because that's our legacy, my legacy. And you all have a legacy. And so I was telling who's the story, Helene, about my son. My son is 27, but like most kids, don't listen to their parents, right? So I like to teach my son a lot of things, but he wouldn't always listen. So I purposely put 3 men in his path. These were men in my men's Bible study, and I asked them to mentor my son, and they agreed to it. You just don't be a mentor; you have to want to be one. So these guys said yes, and it was years later. I'm in the car with Eric because I remember this to the day, and I'm trying to teach him something, and he says to me, "Oh, Dad, I got better teachers than you." And I said, "Oh yeah, who?" And he named 2 of the 3. So that's when I knew it was working. And I'm not going to say it's easy to find the mentors to put in your child or your grandchild's path. It takes work. But how many kids are missing that in their lives? And I have several mentors now that some of them are paid, But like for my book, I have a mentor helping me with some stuff. But that's what it takes. If you don't know, find someone, pay someone, recruit someone to help. And you guys are in a position, I think you all have grandkids. And grandkids today need some guidance. So that's what I know. So this is an interesting story. You want some more stories, or you had enough? You like more stories?
Yes.
This is my second arm I've ever had. No. Okay, that's probably my phone. But this is the second arm I had. You know what happened to the first one?
It went in the bay.
Yeah, I lost it water skiing.
In the bay. It pulled off and down it went.
So I'm the summer after I lost my accident, we had a boat, and my brother and I were big water skiers. So my brother's driving the boat, and I'm going to get up on one ski like I always did. Well, I hooked this on the rope, and I fell. Only he didn't stop the boat. And eventually, it just ripped off and sank. We dove for it for a day or two, and there was no way we were going to find it. But the part that's so interesting about it is, I had to pay for this. Workman's Comp paid for the first one. They said, we're not buying you another one a year later. So I maintained this arm for 20 years, till 1987-ish, because I didn't know what was going on. I paid to have all the repairs to this. It's very old, but it still works. I mean, I have a new one now. This is a new one. It's a lot cleaner looking, and that's a different arm, but that's the new version. But the part that's interesting about this, I was at a golf tournament inside the Indy 500. And I'm playing with my hook, right? Because that's all I got. And there's a guy there that says, from a prosthetic shop, and he says, you need to get one of these electric arms. And I'd never seen one. Now this is 30 years, I think 87, it's almost 30 years later. Never heard of one of these. This is a myoelectric arm. He says, I'll show you in a minute. But he said, you need to get one of these. And I said, okay. He told me what to do. Jim Presentine wrote to the Workman's Comp board, and basically the story goes, my case had never been closed in 30 years. And the rule is that if you don't have any medical bills for 6 years, they close the case automatically. So it never got closed. So they were not in a very good position. Plus, I was still an amputee. It wasn't like I was trying to fake it. So they've been paying for all this stuff for the last 40 years. Not quite 40 years. And this arm is about, today, this is probably $40,000. The new one I'm going to get is close to $80,000. And they pay for all that. This is electric, so just, can I?
Yeah.
This is called myoelectric, and everybody's curious how this works, okay? So there's a motor in here, there's a battery right here that has to be charged. There's a sensor here, and there's a sensor here. It picks up the electricity in my muscle, not the movement. Whenever I open my hand, it opens. This hand, not this hand. But when you open your hand, the muscle here fires, and it's the millivolts in your hand and the muscle that set it off. That's why it's called myoelectric. Make sense? It's very functional, and this is my third one because I wear them out, and this glove is replaceable. It's all very expensive stuff. I mean, the batteries are $500. It's all German engineering. So it's pretty cool. The new one I'm getting here is even more expensive because it's got multiple. It does this, and then it opens, and it changes position. I'm not sure which one I'm going to get, but they have a lot more options today than I did back then.
I have a question.
Yes.
Do you now that you have the MyoArm, do you ever use?
Oh yeah.
For specific things?
Yeah, it's a good question. The hook can do anything, right? I mean, I can fix anything. I can repair a car. I can pick up a hot fire. You know, there's nothing the hook can't do. I can support my body weight. This will melt. This can't go in the water. I scuba dive and I do all that stuff with these arms. This will melt. Like I said, this is not water friendly at all. This is meant to be functional and cosmetic. I wear it every day, and it's very. If I have a long sleeve shirt on, you can't tell I'm an amputee, right? You can't tell unless you're looking really close and you know what to look for. I mean, I can spot them, but you would never spot it. And there's not much I can't do with this. My prosthetist called me What's the word for using two hands? I forgot. I said, what does that mean? He says,
Ambidextrous?
no, it was bilateral or something. And I said, what does that mean? He said, use two hands. I said, well, aren't you supposed to? And he said, there's a lot of people that have these arms and don't use them. And then there's the whole world of congenital, people that are born without an arm that never get one of these because they're just comfortable. And then there's this term called acquired, right? There's a guy, Chris Hammer, this guy I raced against. He's getting his PhD studying the effects of a acquired disability and the mental stuff that kids go through with that. And he's studying all the data on it. It's pretty fascinating. It'll be interesting when that comes out. But this was, this is my latest swimming arm. So now this is, and I've already broken one of these. They're $900 for that. So this goes in like that, and I can swim with this, and I swim really well with this, but I can't use it in the paratriathlon. So next weekend when I race, can't use this. In the Ironman, I use this. And don't get hit by me because it hurts. This hurts a lot. So, but that's swimming arm. This is my mom's favorite. This is kind of the evolution. This is the first golf attachment. Okay, this would go in the end of an arm like this, and it would hold the golf club. Okay, so I got this in the late 80s. Okay, so this works really well. The problem was the springs kept breaking, and so they came up with a better way, which was this. And this is all made out of titanium, so it was ridiculously difficult to get made. But now, this is even a better one. This is another one of these ridiculously expensive ones. But this thing holds a club, and this bends just. There's like a heavy duty spring inside of there. They didn't make this 30 years ago. This is out of a company in Colorado. So that's that.
What is that made of?
I don't know what that's made of. It's heavy duty. You can see it. You can't hurt it. Heavy duty.
Heavy.
And then when I started biking, when I told you I crashed into the building and all that, that's when I got this device. This hooked onto the handlebar just like that. Okay? So I could ride upright. Well, that's good and bad because I was safe. I wasn't going to fall, crash. But I couldn't go when you're sitting upright, you got all the wind in your face. So at a certain point, you start to lose speed. And this won't let go, right? If I crash, if I crash, it'll come off, okay? But on my bike that's outside, I have aero bars now. And so I want to be able to go from this position to this position. And so we came up with this arm. This is a prototype. So this arm goes on like this. And this just sets on the handlebar, and then I can go into my aero position and get down like this because I want to be aerodynamic, right? The further down I get, the faster I can go. When you get above 18 miles an hour, aerodynamic's becoming a big deal. And so that's probably almost 2.5 years in making, and now I have my newest one which says Dare to Try. This was a hit. I just got this about a month ago. This is graphite, so it's really, really light. And when I go down the road, you can see I'm with Dare to Try. And so they take a lot of pictures of me, and so it's just fun, right? Everything match. This is actually this same shirt made into the arm, and that's what I use and ride with as I speak. But that's been. I just thought it was interesting because it's quite a process to go through this, and they never made one of these before. They're all custom made, and he bent this hook just a special way so it fit, and all the stuff to get modified to do. And that's just some of my arms. I didn't bring them all.
Well, you must have fun going through an airport.
Well, I do. I get stopped, obviously, which I should. I don't take all those on the airplane, but I get searched heavily.
I have a question I'm fascinated by your ability. When you're thinking you want to pick something up with that arm, there's got to be a connection between I know the muscles in your arm, but...
What's your question?
Like how
It's a good question, but I want you to speak it.
Well, there's a connection between the brain and the muscle. And my fascination is when you're thinking of opening your hand, the ability is there, but the muscle is there.
Okay.
How does that work?
Because I think open, just like you think open.
So it is partially brain.
Because I'm moving the muscle of my hand in here.
Okay.
So put your finger right there and then open your hand. There's a muscle right there that moves. Yeah, that's what this picks up. So when I think I want to open my hand, it just automatically does it. Now I have to tell you, I've been doing this for a long time, and it took a little bit. It took some time to get used to it, but it is automatic. That's why my prosthetist said it's like I'm bilateral, because I don't have to think about it. I just do it. Yeah.
But it's a very complex neurophysiology concept.
Okay. Well, that I don't know.
Very complex.
Well, that's
the
why
connection between
that's-
your brain and getting those muscles to fire.
That's fascinating to me.
Well, but literally all I think about is opening and closing my hand, just like you do, and you don't think about it, just like I don't think about it.
They say when someone loses a limb, they still feel the limb.
Yes, you
So-
do. I do.
You still, okay.
Well, you're talking about phantom pains, right? And so for the longest time, probably 20 years, it was very apparent. Now it's not as apparent. I don't feel the pain. I can still feel my fingers. I can still move my fingers individually. Inside, if I take this off and move my fingers, you'll see what I'm talking about. So when I move my fingers, you can see the muscles move. Just like yours. The difference is I don't have a lot of meat on my bones anymore, right? But that's the same effect. And then this is kind of gross. Right there, if the meat grinder had gone around one more round, that'd be 2 inches shorter. That's what the doctor told me. Yeah, right there. So, but this is the sensor right here. You can see the marks because they sit really tight. And so whenever I open my hand, this muscle right here triggers the electronic hand, right? And whenever I close, it's right there, just like yours. And they spend a fair amount of time testing where to put these things so they're in the right spot, right? So it works easily. And it's all adjustable. I mean, it's all adjustable. But here. Feel that. That's what I carry around every day.
Oh, is it light?
No.
That was the point. It's not light.
Oh, it's heavy.
And it's all on the end, but it's what I use. And so
It's heavier than, how much does this weigh?
that's about 3 pounds.
It's heavier than that.
Well, this is the one that's really light. But that's
But that one's heavy.
that's
The
that's
batteries in it is heavy, right?
batteries, hands, motors.
When you had the phantom pain,
Hmm.
is there anything you do for that?
No.
Do you take,
You could take an ibuprofen or something, but I was
Would that help?
I don't remember, to be honest with you. That was so long ago. So this is another part that's quite fascinating for me about being on the Dare to Try team with all these athletes. Except for the blind guys, they're all recent accidents, less than 10 years. So they can remember, and they still have phantom pains, a lot of them. They can still remember having their legs work. I can't. It's too far long ago, and I don't remember. I mean, I have to think really hard what it's like to be 15 again, right? But Jose, my friend, we were at a restaurant. He remembers being there with his legs because his accident was 4 years ago. He's paralyzed from the waist down from a car accident. He was in the passenger seat and nothing they could do.
is that a severe pain or is it?
His legs feel nothing from the waist down. And then this is also fascinating because there's other guys that are paralyzed that one of their legs will twitch or they can lift their leg, but they can't stand up. You know more about this than I do. There's another guy that his name is James. He's from Milwaukee. He got on the bus. They lifted him up onto the bus. He got in and he stood up to move into the seat. And I got all over. I was giving a bunch of grief because you can walk. He can't, but he could. He had enough strength. And they're all different. And they're all fascinating people. He has phantom pains, but it's just different. Yeah, they do, but those are all recent accidents for these guys. A bunch of them are military, and a lot of them are motorcycle accidents. Guys lose their legs. They've been in Iraq, and they come back and they have a motorcycle accident.
Oh, that is heavy.
Yeah, they come back from the war, don't they?
Yeah.
Safe and sound, and then they get out of the war.
Yeah, you're not going to hurt it.
Yeah. Peter, have you heard of a group called Team Triumph with Christian?
I've
Jensen?
just recently heard about it.
Yeah, he was a trainer at Bellin Fitness, and then he became the director of this. And I'm glad you heard about him because he would be somebody you really should talk to.
Now, is he local? Because it is
Yes,
a local
he
chapter.
He lives in, actually, I think it's Bellevue or Ledgeview or out there, but he is the head of Team Triumph, the state Team Triumph.
The state, okay.
Yeah, he started this because one of the women he trained, her husband brought her in on his back. She was a runner, and I'm not quite sure what happened to her. It was an accident, but she wanted to run again. Well, what she wanted to do was work with him so she could, but she can't run again.
Okay.
So
Whatever the injury was, yeah.
got together with it. I mean, he didn't invent this whole thing. It was not in this state.
Okay, because it seems to be a national group.
Yeah, yes, it is a national group, but he is a director of the state. So he's got a website. Team
No, I've been there because I
okay,
saw it on Schneider's website, and I'd never heard of it. But they're pushing people in carts.
Yes, what it is,
it's a different.
Team Angels push people that have disabilities who want to race, want to do anything. But Christian Jensen and
Maybe you can make an introduction because here's what's fascinating. Dare to Try has a camp that takes people who are disabled, not cognitive disabilities, physical disabilities, and they teach them how to do a triathlon for the first time. We have all the equipment and we have all the coaches, and we take somebody that's disabled, maybe not this, I think these kids are different because they can't.
Some are and some aren't.
Okay.
Some is physical, some is mental.
And so we do this where we teach them how to swim. We have all the bikes, the hand cycles, and all the different kind of bikes that they would need because to buy that stuff's expensive. And then we have the push cart, the push kind of things. And at the end on Sunday morning, everybody does a triathlon, and it's a shortened version. But imagine crossing the finish line the first time ever as a person with a disability. It's unbelievable. There's tears and screaming, and it's just wonderful to do that. And Dare to Try does it's in Pleasant Prairie in June. Unfortunately, it's already done for this year. We had 40 people, and it's so cool. It's so
that's
cool.
What this
Oh,
is too.
yeah. That's an awesome. I'd love to meet the person.
We'll give him a phone call.
Yeah, I would love
There
to.
were several of those teams with that, whatever
Yeah.
it's called, Ed Bellin.
Yeah, so they raced in the Bellin race,
Well, see,
right?
he was a
There were
trainer at
several of
Bell, and
them.
now he's full-time with Team Triumph. Yeah.
Because one of
Oh, he's
my daughters
full-time.
is a nurse, and she works for Bellin, and she was part of that.
Yeah,
Okay.
she was one of the angels
Yeah.
pushing people.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, it's a
Do they
great
have an event
organization.
coming up?
Pardon me?
Do they have an event coming
Oh,
up?
they do stuff all over the state. He doesn't just do it in Green Bay, but they may. They
Because I
may.
have
I
a
don't
friend
know.
whose son-in-law is involved in it, and they have to. He's the
He's one of
angel.
them.
He's the angel.
The
Yeah.
Fox
Right.
Valley Marathon is coming up.
Okay,
In
maybe
July.
that's
That- yeah, that is-
I think it's coming
and
like
they
next
have
week.
to raise the money
Oh, and there's an Ironman in
to
Appleton.
buy the equipment.
In Apple?
You know what?
Wait a minute, who raises the money?
Honestly, other
The
than
angel?
Angels.
So people that push.
Yeah, I don't know
Because
that,
they're
Nancy.
having some
All I know is
fundraising.
Christian is it, but I'll connect.
Yeah, no, it'd be great because we're trying to do the same thing.
Yep.
It's the same thing. And so I'm going to finish with this, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I will sign the books, is that Dare to Try does depend on donations. And the book is a great donation, but if anybody's touched by our story and what we do to help people, we would gladly take some donations. And I'll leave it at that. I don't want to, but yeah, it's really cool to take somebody for the first time. And I just learned about that.
And he actually knew nothing about this, and he said this man brought this woman in, and he's probably 35, maybe he's 40, I doubt he's that old. But this was several years ago. He was probably still in his 20s, and you can imagine a 20-year-old trainer. Oh my God, what do I do? That was his whole thing.
And now he's doing it full time.
He's just a remarkable. You remind me a lot of him.
Okay. No, I'd love to talk to
2
him.
or 3 years older than him, but.
Yeah, just a few. Yeah, thank you. You're kind. You can press the button.